Right, morning everyone. Welcome to our first virtual coffee morning. And if, like me, you've been up all night and you need a break from the US elections, then this offers you the perfect alternative. All sitting in the comfort of our own homes. I hope you've grabbed a cup of tea or coffee in my case, and you'll sit and enjoy the next hour and a half or so with us. Hope it's going to be really comfortable, enjoyable and informative. I just want to make you aware that I have to do a little bit of housekeeping, and the meeting is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube and website. So please turn off your video if you're uncomfortable with being recorded. Everybody is muted, and as you can appreciate, with this number of people, it's not possible for us to conduct a meeting when everybody's mic is on. We have a steady flow of people still coming in, so my colleagues will help me to enter those people, and the crowd will get bigger as we go along in the morning. You can post your comments, your questions and your feedback via the chat facility. You will have the opportunity to ask questions later. Please do not post any links or images onto the chat section, or you and your links will be removed from the meeting. And that's just to ensure that we have safety, knowing that Zoom and other conferencing facilities in the past have had some security issues. And just a reminder that we're active on social media. You can follow us at ARCC Ltd on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Now, I'll take you briefly through the agenda. Mamoon, would you mind sharing the agenda, please? Okay, we've got the agenda up. So basically, we'll be doing a poll at the beginning, and then we will go on and have an introduction to our coffee morning panel. They will be, we've got Rachel Flowers, we've got Dr. Vishali Shetty, we've got Mike Bell, we've got Dr. Naina Asuji, who will all be talking for 5 minutes, followed by question and answer sessions. I will do a much better introduction to that esteemed panel in a bit. And then we will have an opportunity to have a Q&A between the public and the panel, which is the whole point of this meeting today, so that it gives you an opportunity to ask questions. And then after that, we will have an introduction into our expert patient program and our long-term conditions program by my colleague Lizzie. And then my colleague Mamoon will run through another couple of polls, and then we will actually be pulling out some names from a hat, and my colleague Kat will be announcing a winner for the mini coffee hampers we have. And then Mamoon will tell you a little bit more about what our next virtual coffee morning and what's happening at ARCC. Thank you for that, Mamoon. So as we enter strict lockdown conditions, the cold weather is kicking in and Christmas is around the corner. The NHS has been busy preparing for its winter flu vaccinations programme. The NHS is telling us that vaccines are the most effective way to prevent infectious diseases. However, not everyone believes this. Anti-vaccine stories are spreading online throughout social media and gaining some real popularity. Experts warn us that they may not be based on scientific evidence and could put yourself and your children at risk of serious illness. Since vaccines were introduced in the UK, diseases like smallpox, polio, and tetanus that used to kill or disable millions of people are either gone or seen very rarely. Other diseases like measles and diphtheria have been reduced by up to 99.9% since their vaccines were introduced. And we're told that if people stop having vaccines, it's possible for infectious diseases to quickly spread again. Recently, ARCC has been involved in many health-related programs and conversations in the borough, and we've learned that immunisations have emerged as a significant area of concern. Immunisations have not had the take-up that's needed. There's a range of good reasons. There's a range of reasons for why this may be the case, but we need to explore them and address them in order to improve immunization rates and ensure maximum health protection for local population. We know that the Asian and minority ethnic groups remain low in take-up compared to white communities, and that there are many myths, questions, and concerns circulating the community that need to be addressed. So when I challenged, and when I say I haven't even introduced myself. Let me introduce it. I'm Eva Mir, and I'm the CEO of the Asian Resource Centre. It's not so important who I am. In fact, it's really important who my panel are. So when I challenged my panel, who are the public health, the director of Croydon Public Health and the chair of the Croydon Health Services NHS, to answer some of the community concerns, they quickly rose to the challenge and offered to attend a public meeting to dispel common myths and misconceptions. So this is really an opportunity for you to directly ask your questions to our expert health panel. And so without further ado, I'll start our session very quickly, but before I go to the panel, I want to do a very quick poll. So Mamoon, will you do our first poll, please?
Yes, certainly. So the first poll is asking, will you be taking the flu vaccination this year? So this is a poll that we want to do right at the beginning of the session. And after you've heard all the speakers, we will repeat this poll again to see if any of you have changed your minds. So it's a very quick poll. It's interactive. What will happen is you'll get a pop-up on your screen asking you the question, will you be taking the flu vaccination this year? Yes, no, or not sure. So just wait for that, select your option and submit. I hope everyone can see it. Yeah, so I can see people voting. And once everyone's voted, I'll be able to share the results with you immediately. We'll probably give another 30 seconds for people to cast their votes. I can see that 80% of the participants have voted so far. So there are still 20% of the people in the room that haven't. I'll give you one final chance, 10 more seconds to cast your vote, please. So the question is, will you be taking the flu vaccination this year? Yes, no, not sure. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm sharing the results with you on screen. Hopefully all of you can see the results there. 75% of you said yes, you will be taking the flu vaccination. 25% said no. So thank you very much for partaking in this first poll this morning. Over to you, Emma.
Thanks very much, Baboon. And that looks way more positive than we had in the last poll, where potentially it was 50-50 split between people taking the vaccination and not taking it or being unsure. And I'm glad that we've got some really decisive people in the room today who haven't selected not sure. So let's see if we can get that number up by the end of the meeting. Just a small disclaimer, other staff have been allowed to vote in the poll, partly just because of the setup, and therefore the numbers are slightly lower than what we would have expected. So it's time to introduce our expert panel, and I will start with Rachel Flowers, the Director of Croydon Public Health. Rachel's an experienced Director of Public Health, and she has the statutory responsibility for the health and well-being of the people of Croydon. Rachel has over 30 years experience of working across the statutory sector, including local government, NHS bodies, senior civil services, and the GLA at senior and very senior level. Previously, a vice chair of 2 national charities and experience of lobbying at regional and national level, working with a wide range of district, county, unitary and metropolitan local authorities. She's also been the vice chair of a cooperative secondary school in the East End of London. She's currently a council member on the faculty of Public Board, an assessor for the UK Public Health Register, and chair of the South West London's Child Death Review Panel, the CDOP. So I'd like to introduce Rachel Flowers. Would you please tell us in 5 minutes, give us some information about the flu vaccine during lockdown?
Okay, thank you very much, Emma, and thank you, colleagues. Crumbs, that sounds like give us a job. Basically, I've been involved in public health for a very long time. I'm passionate around reducing inequalities, and I'm thrilled to bits to be invited to talk to you around seasonal flu. So I'm going to kind of like personal life experience. I've nearly died of seasonal flu twice, at the age of 19, when I was in hospital for 3 weeks, and when I was pregnant with my second son. I don't know whether people know that, but I know what it's like to actually have really, really bad seasonal flu. So even if I wasn't director of public health, I would do everything in my power to actually stop people I love, people I care for, actually getting seasonal flu. I have some slides, please. So I'm not sure who's going to be, is Maman, are you
Yes,
going to?
yes,
Thank
Rachel,
you very
I'll
much.
share that. Just bear with me, please.
Just in relation to the history, it's only been in the last kind of 40, 50 years that actually non-communicable disease, heart disease, diabetes, etc., has actually impacted us. We are now seeing the impact of a communicable disease within STARS. So next slide, please. Could you just put the YouTube video on? Don't listen to me, just listen to It's Not Just the Flu.
Just the flu. I hear people say it every year. But
Can people see the YouTube?
In an average year, the flu virus kills 11,000 people. And this isn't an average year. The flu vaccine is the best protection for you and those around you. That's why it's free to those most at risk. Ask your pharmacist or your GP if you're eligible for a free flu vaccine.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I think that the slide set didn't kind of like work. Can I have the next slide, please, Mamin, please? I can only apologise. You'd have thought that after months of using kind of like all this technology, we'd get better. So I can see you all smiling. Thank you. I hope you're smiling with me, not laughing at me. But thank you. I don't mind either. Kind of linked. Thank you very much. So the next slide, please. Next slide. I'm leaving that well alone. It's not just the flu. It kind of like flu is dangerous if you have underlying health conditions. It is eligible, kind of many of us will be eligible for free flu vaccine. I include kind of include myself in relation to that. Next slide, please. Sorry. Okay, so myths and facts. Myths, you can catch the flu from the vaccine. Well, flu vaccine is made from an interactive virus that just can't transmit kind of like the infection. Kind of, so it may make you feel, your arm may feel a bit sore when you inject it, and some people might get a slight temperature for a couple of days. Other reactions are very rare. You don't need to be vaccinated against the flu every year. Myth. The flu virus mutates every year. So getting vaccinated each year is important to make sure you have immunity so that the strains most likely to cause an outbreak can be dealt with. Having flu is like having a heavy cold. Big myth. Flu kills. It's a lot worse than a heavy cold. The analogy is that you lie in bed, and if there's a kind of like £1 million at the bottom of the bed, you cannot go and reach around this. As I said, I spent 3 weeks as a 19-year-old within hospital with pneumonia, kind of like being these, and actually they were fearing for both me and my child when I had flu before. it actually impacts around this 11,000 people in the UK die on an average year around seasonal flu. And if I practice the guidance for COVID, I won't get flu. Well, actually good infection control, all the stuff I've been banging on about hands, face, space is really good practice anyway. We should have been doing this. Will have an effect on reducing flu circulation, but it can't be guaranteed. So the flu vaccination is a belt and braces, the way that we can actually protect ourselves and our families. Next one, please. Okay. At the moment, we're looking at the evidence, the scientific evidence in terms of the co-infection, kind of what is happening about flu and COVID-19. So the risk of death is more than double for people who test positive for both flu and COVID compared to COVID-19 alone. So it's a double whammy. Those with co-infections of the two viruses with much more risk of severe illness. Most of the cases of co-infection were in older people and more than half of them died. So this is the evidence, this is the fact that we have around this, is that flu and COVID together actually combine to make it even more deadly. Next, please. Flu in children, and actually it's a vital part of protecting the whole population is to vaccinate children who are super spreaders. They can really pass the virus around to us, to the parents, to grandparents and stuff like this. It can be extremely unpleasant for children, for illness for children too. Unlike COVID, which thank goodness isn't, flu can be really nasty. And actually, I'm sure Nena and kind of like Mike can talk about the issues around children under the age of 5 being hospitalized due to flu more than any other age group. Next, please. So, because I'm whizzing through. This is the reading bit, kind of like, so I won't talk around this. Next slide, please. The eligible groups, they've changed the eligible groups in relation to this. You should have all got contacts and told that you're eligible. These are people who are eligible for free vaccine. And I know Mike and Nana will be talking about this. I also recognise that this year that there's been a slight stagger in terms of vaccines for those people under the age of 65. Bear with around this. There will be still some more vaccines available, and I would recommend that kind of like when vaccines are available, even if you're not eligible for free vaccines, that you consider the kind of like, I think it's normally about £15. I know that's expensive, but definitely worthwhile protecting yourself. Next, please. Okay. So this in terms of this biggest vaccination program in history, so Nena and Mike will be talking about this. It means that with COVID, the way that we actually kind of manage delivering is more challenging, but they'll talk about this. But it is one of the most effective ways to reduce the pressure on health and social care system. Every year, I, as your Director of Public Health, have been banging on about the importance of this year more than any other year. Those most at risk of flu are also more vulnerable to COVID-19. So the population groups who are more susceptible to ill health in the cold are increased risk to the double threat posed by COVID-19 and seasonal flu. And actually seasonal flu can address some of the inequalities which have widened around COVID-19 and protects people who've received the vaccine and around this. And this is a way that we can protect ourselves and our loved ones and the people that we care for. And somebody actually said to me kind of last week, well, I live with them, but I don't love them. I'm not quite sure what that was about, but the people that we live with. I'm just going to throw away comments. So I think that's the end of my slide set. Yes, so that was me. I'm sure it's over 5 minutes because of the minute, but I've whizzed through around this. Tracy, I understand why people are kind of like do look around the kind of like the vaccines and think they save life. It's proven to save lives. If you have flu, and I've had flu twice, you do not want to have that. You do not want to have proper flu again. If there's anything that can stop you getting flu, then surely kind of like we as kind of like intelligent people should use that opportunity, because actually the alternative is significantly worse for your health, both physical and mental. Thank you.
Rachel, thank you very much. And what an impressive CV. And thank you, a really personal account of how flu can actually affect all of us. I do have loads of questions for you, but I'm going to move on until we get to the question and answer panel. Just for you to think about a little bit, Rachel, for later on, perhaps giving some clarity on what the difference between seasonal flu and the COVID vaccine. I mean, the seasonal flu and for COVID might be for people to recognize the difference in the symptoms, to know which one they've got, basically. Next, we will move on to Dr. Shetty. Dr. Vaishali Shetty, who is the governing body GP member of Croydon CCG. Dr. Shetty is a GP partner and a trainer at Birdhurst Medical Practice in South Croydon. She's also a member of the Croydon Local Medical Committee. Dr. Shetty works for the Croydon Place part of the South West London CCG as a medical health clinical senior responsible officer. That's quite a mouthful. Thus her interest in promoting Croydon talking therapies. Dr. Shetty's first job after completing her MBBS in India was at Croydon University Hospital, and she also did her GP training as a part of the Croydon VTS scheme. So she's one of our very own, had all her training in Croydon. Dr. Shetty has a special interest in family planning, and she provides this service in her practice. Her interests outside of medicine are cooking and teaching, and Dr. Shetty speaks 7 different Indian languages. So that makes it much easier, I should imagine, for her to develop rapport with her patients in Croydon. So if I can take you to Dr. Shetty, and may I ask that Dr. Shetty, you talk to us a little bit about the flu vaccine in general for 5 minutes.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. And I'm really sort of overwhelmed to be part of Croydon, let's put it that way, because Croydon has been very special to me, and because everything, this is my home and this is where everything started, and that's why Croydon is so important for me. And I know we are talking about flu vaccinations here this morning, but I would just, as a GP, I would just pass this message on to everyone that GP surgeries are open for everyone. Business is as usual for everyone. So if you think that you need to speak to a GP, please do contact your GP surgeries. They are not closed. You know, it could be any reason. Yes, the practice, the way of working in general practice has changed since COVID times. So most practices, the way they work is they offer telephone consultations. You speak to the GP, and the GP would then decide whether to bring you in based on your needs and assessment. So yes, please do not think that you cannot see your GP or they are unavailable to sort the issues out. So that is my earnest request to everyone here. The second bit, before I start talking about flu, because I'm a mental health CSRO, I have to say this. Mental health in the ethnic minority community is there. Now, whether we recognize it, whether we talk about it, it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone to talk about mental health, but I would say give it a thought. And if there is an issue, ask for help. On the NHS, we have Croydon Talking Therapies. If you Google Croydon Talking Therapies, these are counseling services, and they have capacity to assess you. But please ask for help. And that's really important. And I really stress, because what data has shown, evidence has shown that the referrals from ethnic minority or Asian community is very minimal compared to the other white population. And that does not mean mental health does not exist in the society. It is there. It's just we need to recognize and take help. So these are the 2 things before I come back to flu. And of course, as Rachel, who is very passionate about the vaccination, and exactly just echoing her words, flu is not just a cold. It is something very serious, and it's really important to protect ourselves and to protect our loved ones. If you might get a flu, you might not experience sort of bad side effects, but if you're visiting your elderly people or your elderly parents, then they might contract flu from you, and they might have a detrimental effect. And that's the reason why, if you're eligible for a vaccine, take the vaccine. Now, it is available in the pharmacy. It is available at the GP surgery. And, going back to the polls, there were 25% of the population. I'm just speaking to the 25% of the poll who sort of had made their mind up. And I hope by the end of this coffee morning, they will change their mind. But I would say, speak to your practice nurse, speak to your GP of why you, or your local pharmacist of why your thoughts are of not having a flu vaccination before you make that decision. So yes, it is available at the pharmacy, it is available at the GP surgery, so please contact them. The age group is exactly what Rachel had shown, 2 to 3 years, which is normally given at the school, at the surgery, and the older children 3 to 17 is in the school immunization team, does that. 18 to less than 65, again, is the at-risk group, and above 65, everyone is eligible for a flu vaccination. Now, this year we have a new cohort, 50 to 65. We should be expecting the vaccination delivery by the end of this month. And hopefully, as soon as that is available, practices will start to give those vaccinations. Now, just talking about the at-risk groups, now there is a long list. It is available on the government.uk website, but just picking up, and if you have a heart problem, or if you have diabetes, or you have sort of extensive asthma or COPD, or you'll have a lowered immunity because of certain drugs you are taking, like you're under a rheumatologist, you're taking sort of steroids or methotrexate, in that case, or you've had a stroke in the past, or you have a learning disability, or sort of any neurological problems like cerebral palsy, sickle cell disease, you are eligible. And the list is, there is a long list. I might not have covered everything on the list, but these are the most common reasons why we would give eligible to a flu jab. Now, yes, coming back to the side effects of taking a flu, as Rachel was saying, these are inactivated sort of viruses. You wouldn't get a flu because of that. That's a myth. You might get a local reaction where you take the flu jab, arm might be a bit sore, rash, something like that, sort of achy muscles and things like that. That normally settles down in a day or two. And for the vaccine to work, it's normally 10 to 14 days before it, gives you the protection. Now, coming back to the, this particularly asked me about the children's nasal flu and the pork gelatin in that. Now, yes, it is there. Now, it is sort of hydrolyzed and it is very minimalistic in that, but I do understand and respect the concerns certain Muslim colleagues might have that. Now, a lot of work has been done with the British Muslim Society and the public health, and this year Muslim Society has sort of done a program called Operation Vaccination, and letters have come out through them saying that, there is an alternative available if parents are really worried about them not having the nasal flu jab because of the religious regions of the thing of having the pork gelatin in that. Then please speak to your practice nurse or the GP, because an alternative option is available rather than not giving a flu. So when there are options, we need to take it. So that's important. Coming back to, as we talked about the side effects, and I was just reading a various article. There was another article from the Jewish community as well, where they do promote the vaccine, the nasal spray vaccine, and they tell the parents to make an informed choice about it. So these are the sort of common things about the flu, and I would sort of urge everyone to get their flu jab because it is important. It saves lives. And as we know, we're coming into a festive season. In 10 days' time, we have Diwali. And I would say, if you love your loved ones and you want to have another good Diwali next year, make sure you get your flu vaccination. Similarly, if you love your loved ones and want to have another good Christmas next year, make sure you get your flu vaccinations. And please, we are getting into a second lockdown. Follow the government guidance, because the last wave has shown, for whatever reason, it has affected the ethnic minority and the BAME group. The COVID has affected us. Now, a lot of research will come out in future of why that has happened. The only thing at this point of time we can do is stay safe and save our lives and the lives of our loved ones. Thank you.
Dr. Shetty, thank you very much. That was really comprehensive, and you covered so many different things, even talking about mental health, talking about eligibility, talking about long-term conditions, and talking about why it's so important to protect not just ourselves, but our family and our loved ones. So thank you very, very much for that. And then we'll come back to you with lots of questions. You did a little bit of myth busting there, and I know you covered certainly one of the most popular ones around the gelatine and some of the religious restrictions. So thank you for that, and I'm sure there may be some questions a little bit more around that topic, around religious and restrictions and things like that. Now I'm going to move on to Mike Bell. So he's the director of MBARC and chairman of Croydon NHS Health Services. Croydon Health Services NHS Trust. MBARC provides a range of consultancy projects to national and local public sector bodies across the UK. Mike has more than 20 years of senior NHS board level experience and is currently the chairman of Croydon Health Services NHS Trust. Prior to moving to Croydon, he spent 11 years on the board of strategic health authorities, including serving both as interim chair and long-term vice chairman of NHS London. Mike was initially appointed as a turnaround chairman at Croydon, but since 2013, he has pioneered a new model of health and social care with moves to a total place model of commissioning and delivery. He has chaired a wide range of other organisations and networks such as the London Health Observatory, the London Medical Health and Employment Partnership, and was the London Health Commissioner for of London 2007 to 13. Mike has worked as a management consultant in 1993 and is a principal director of MBARC, which provides a range of consultancy projects, as I said, locally and nationally across the UK. This includes a number of long-term assignments for the Department of Health, NHS England and devolved administrations in Scotland, Wales and London. He has a strong track record in public health related programmes with a particular focus on health inequalities, diversity and inclusion. He has led a number of national programmes in relation to both sexual violence and sexual health and HIV. He was the first non-clinician to be served on the board of BASHH. Currently, his focus is on leadership development and governance. With such an impressive CV, I'll ask Mike, if you can tell us just a little bit. I mean, it'd be a real shame if I didn't ask you to talk a little bit about Croydon's Community Strategy 2016 and beyond. And I understand it reflects the priorities of local people and what they've said is important to them. So I'd like you to speak a couple of minutes about that, please.
Yeah, very happy to. And I'm going to leave all of the conversations around flu to our medical director, Nena Asuji, who's coming on afterwards. But just before doing that, just to stress the importance, we heard a little bit about the fact that there are 11,000, in an average year, there are 11,000 people die of flu in the UK. That translates in Croydon to 100 people. That translates as one person per day on average dying during the flu season. This is important. This isn't like as Rachel said, this isn't like a common cold. That's the challenge that we face in Croydon. I also wanted to link this into the 3 priorities that we've developed within the health and care plan. So just to remind you of those 3 priorities, the first is very much a focus on prevention and proactive care. The second is about unlocking the power of communities. And the third is about putting services back into the heart of the community. I'll say a little bit about each of those. So the focus on prevention and proactive care is part of that is things like immunizations and vaccinations. We know they make a massive difference to people's health and well-being, but we want to go further than the immunizations and vaccinations as we look at preventative care. Working with our colleagues, particularly in primary care, but also across the council, we think that we can identify people most at risk of a whole range of avoidable conditions. And that means that we can intervene much, much earlier, making the hospital the place of last resort rather than the first point of call. So we're working closely across the piece in Croydon to deliver an exciting new model of proactive and preventative care. The second area is about unlocking the power of communities. So Croydon has built up a really powerful integrated model of care, which is based upon partnership between the council, between different parts of the NHS, and critically with the community. What we recognise by that being the second priority is the absolute importance of people being empowered to better look after themselves and support their communities, families and neighbourhoods. So we will be looking at a significant shift in resource within the NHS to support many, many more community-based activities that empower local communities and ensure people stay well and have the best opportunities in life. That will be focused on early years, it will be focused upon people as they move through childhood, through every stage of their life. And we know that organisations like ours are absolutely vital to delivering that support and empowering their communities. And the third area that's really, really significant is about using the model of care that we've developed, the partnership model between those institutions and our communities, to put services back as close as we can to the communities we're serving. So general practice has organised itself into 3 primary care networks, and they're already doing a huge amount of work identifying people within those PCN networks that would benefit from early preventative work and proactive care. Croydon is way ahead of the game in terms of social prescribing, making sure that doctors get people to a range of different interventions that aren't always medical, aren't always pharmaceutical. And of course, with our partners in the council, we are also setting up a network of 6 integrated care neighbourhoods, an absolute partnership with the communities that we're serving within those, and bringing a whole range of different health and wellbeing services together. By getting the flu jab, you're helping to ensure that we are in the best possible place to support you, and you're also taking some of the very, very early steps towards that model of self-care and partnership between our institutions and our communities to build a better, stronger and healthier Croydon. I'll now pass across to our other expert in the room, Nena, and Emma, I'm sure you've got a very long biography telling us about Croydon's medical director. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks very much, Mike, and thank you for that really informative part on talking about early intervention, talking about proactive and preventative care, talking about unlocking communities and managing self-health, and really the importance of community-based activities. And I look forward to our partnership in the future in trying to support you in trying to get as many services as we can on ground level with the people that we are working with. So yes, indeed, we're moving on to Nena. Just before we do though, I want to, because Nena is our last speaker, if you have questions, now would be a good time to start thinking about posting them onto the chat section. Of course, you can just raise your hand and we will come to you in the Q&A discussion part, but just start thinking about some of the questions you might have, and haven't we had a lot of food for thought so far. So I will move on to Dr. Nena Asuji. And I've heard Nena speak many, many times, and I'm really welcome her expertise on this. And she's a medical director and deputy CEO of Croydon Health Services NHS Trust. With more than 20 years experience within the NHS, Nena has been the medical director at Croydon Health Services since 2015. And prior to that, she was the associate medical director and deputy medical director. Nena leads on promoting research and development and is the Caldecott, Guardian for the Trust, providing senior advice and direction on ethical and correct use of information. Naina joined the Trust as a consultant hematologist in 2005. She's an active member of the National Clinical Research Network for Cancer, Chemotherapy and Pharmacy Advisory Service Committee. She also is an associate lecturer and a consultant for the Mary Seacole programme run by the NHS Leadership Academy, Open University and Hay Group, which develops leadership across the health services. So again, another impressive CV, and aren't we lucky to have the very top people in Croydon sitting with us today to answer your questions. So Dr. Isuji, I'd like you to talk a little bit about some flu myths for about 5 minutes if you can. Thank you.
Emma, thank you very much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And if I can ask for the slides to be put up whilst I do a little bit of tidying up. So I think one of the most important things is that I continue to be a hematologist in Croydon. I continue to care for patients. And I say to all my patients, particularly those with long-term conditions, things like sickle cell anemia and thalassemia, to have their flu vaccine every year. So anyone who comes to my clinic generally complies with that for good reason. And we'll talk a bit about that as well. Like Dr. Shetty and like Mike Bell and like Rachel, actually, I'm highly embedded in Croydon. I trained here as a registrar. I came back here as a consultant. Croydon is in my blood for many reasons. There's so much we can do together. And I do want to reiterate a couple of messages because they're really important. The NHS is here for you. It doesn't matter if there is a pandemic going on. If you are ill, whatever the condition, and you need to have healthcare in primary care or in secondary care, we have organized our services to keep you safe, to keep you protected, and most importantly, to help keep you well. So do attend, do contact us if you have any concerns over coming months or indeed beyond that. And I do want to spend time talking about what my mom said to me. It was about life in general, and this was a stitch in time saves 9. And I think it really is starting to flourish. Prevention is so much more important than cure. It stops the severity, it stops things being complicated, it absolutely reduces the burden of illness, allows people to continue with their lives. It is so much better than cure, and I want us to focus on the things that are within our control. There's so many things in life that we cannot change, but there are a few things we can change. And the flu vaccine, this is one of the things we know can work, can change, will make a difference. And not just for ourselves, but for those around us. There's a concept I've always loved, and it's called externality. It is about where your action doesn't just impact on you, but it impacts on the community in which you live. And the flu vaccine is a really good example of positive externality. By you having it, although if you get the flu, you may not necessarily have a severe infection, somebody else might, and you are potentially carrying it to them. And so our responsibility is to ourselves, to our loved ones, and to our communities. And by us collectively engaging in the flu vaccine, we can create that immunity within the herd, within the community, within the neighborhood in which we live, that helps protect us all. So I can't say it enough. I have to admit a couple of things though. So one is I am needle phobic, but I have my flu vaccine every single year because it is so important. I close my eyes and normally it's done in 2 seconds, and I always make a bigger fuss than I need to. But even for folk who are needle phobic, it often is a very simple, very quick, and very useful. And Dr. Shetty has already spoken about the nasal vaccine, particularly for children. So my kids, I have a 14-year-old who is more needle phobic than I am, and I'm so grateful to the nasal vaccine as an alternative, and to the wonderful people who vaccinate, who also make it as painless as possible. My task today was to speak about some of the myths, and I think colleagues have already spoken about it. First is that, we always say, and I've always said, you can't go out unless you're wearing a coat. You don't want to get the cold, you don't want to get the flu. Actually, it is a myth. The flu is caused by the influenza virus and nothing else. And so not wearing a coat won't cause the flu, but I can talk about how we can maybe exacerbate some of the tendencies towards that. We hear about a lot of viruses. So the flu virus is the influenza virus. They're related viruses. There's a para-influenza virus. There are different types of coronaviruses. There's respiratory syncytial virus. All of these cause various colds. But for the flu, we're talking about the influenza virus. And that's a virus that travels through the air in droplets and to some extent in aerosols. It means that when you talk, sneeze, or cough, that you can actually share and spread these droplets directly onto another person or onto a surface. And then when you touch that surface, transfer that onto yourselves. So Rachel will always say this. I think you're going to now be known as the Hands, Face, Space Director of Public Health. But it pertains to so many diseases. So if we can get that right, we will make such a difference to people. And also remember that it's not just when you're symptomatic. Sometimes, a day or two, normally between 1 and 4 days before you actually acquire before you actually manifest symptoms of the infection, you can still be transmitting the virus. So it's not just about what you see, but also about just being vigilant all the time. Now, the other old adage is feed a cold, starve a cold, feed a cold, starve a fever, get it right. And I'm going to replace that with feed a cold, feed a fever. And again, I'm going to refer to my mom, who, food was her therapy for everything. And actually there is merit in this, because when you're ill, when your body is fighting infection, that is when you need calories more than any other time. You're losing a lot of heat because of the temperature you have. You're losing a lot of calorie because your immune system is kicking in. And so having food regularly is hugely important. More important is having hydration. And I can say that, although it's very difficult when you're feeling poorly to have an appetite or to want to have these things. So it's just about having a little bit often, sips of warm fluid, sips of soup, whatever it is, but just keep it going. Food and drink, hugely, hugely important. We know as well that there are some of the sort of over-the-counter remedies, and they're equally important as well, but they help us feel better. They're not going to cure the cold, they're simply going to help us feel better. And so again, the most important thing is prevention. Prevention both in terms of influenza, in terms of other viruses that cause a common cold, in terms of other infectious conditions. If I can have the next slide, please. The other question is about the side effects of the flu vaccine itself. Now, this is a vaccine that has been around for a very long time. And I was looking back in history. The first sort of recognized flu infection was in 1510, a very, very long time ago. And the first pandemic probably in about 1918. And people have done a lot of work around the flu vaccine. So we know that this has been here. It's been here for a long time. When you look at the number of people who died from flu many years ago compared to the mortality now of 0.1%, that is because we know the vaccine works, and we know that it is safe, and we know that it is effective. So this is something that we can stand behind based on the length of time we've had it to say this is something we know to be safe. Some of the side effects are mild, and they're often temporary. They're related to, where you've had the shot. It might be a little bit painful for a while. People respond to different degrees to that. For some people, it's like a bee sting that lasts for 2 seconds. For others, they feel it's a little bit longer. And often we'd say just a bit of paracetamol or ibuprofen, if you can have that, are reasonable. Sometimes you might have a slightly raised temperature or muscle aches. But what you won't have is the flu, because what you have in that vaccine is inactivated virus. So it is not going to give you the flu. And people often develop symptoms and think, oh, well, that vaccine gave me the flu. It's very likely you were harboring it before and you just manifested afterwards, or you have a cold or something else. So it absolutely will not give you the flu. There are some people who are more prone to allergic reactions. And this is not just about the flu vaccine, it's about a range of other things, including food. And so you may have very, very, very rarely an immediate reaction to the flu vaccine, which our trained vaccinators will pick up. I have to say, in my lifetime, and I'm not that young, I haven't seen it once yet. And before you have your flu vaccine, people will consent you around what's in it, what's not in it, so that if there is a tendency, you can pick that up. If I can have the next slide, please. I hope that was useful. And I would just say again, if I had to emphasize a few things in life, it would be, we're open for business. We're always open for business. We're your local hospital. We're here 24/7. Whatever comes, pandemic or not, we will find a way to treat you safely and effectively. So please don't hold on to any conditions that require healthcare. I would also say prevention is better than cure. And we have the ability, this is one of the things that we can do, this is within our control, to reduce the death rate, and I've seen people die from flu. I've seen colleagues die from flu. And where there's something we can do to stop this, why wouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? This is not just about ourselves. I will go back to that concept of externality. This is something we can do to help our community, and care in community is where we're moving forward. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Naina, so much. And again, lots and lots of information there, and really stressing out that the NHS is open for business, and talking about prevention being better than cure, some myth busting, and even her own needle phobia, which I know that actually I come across more men with needle phobia than women. I don't know if that's just something I've picked up, or if that actually is, that might be a myth. Who knows?
I can say so much, but I won't. Keep moving forward.
So thank you very much to our expert health panel, and we do have questions starting to come in, and really we're running a little bit over time, so unfortunately I'm going to have to cut back a little bit more than I wanted to. I'm going to ask my own colleagues, internal colleagues, to shorten your presentations so that we can maximize the time for people to have Q&A, which is really the purpose of this session today. So I want my colleague Kat, I know we've got around 50 people, maybe more in the room at the moment, which is great, and I would like Kat to start picking up some of the questions and the comments from the comments, please.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Kat. I have been looking at the chat, and a few people have raised some questions. So if you'd like the opportunity to talk, if you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can ask the question directly. So I can see one hand raised already, and that's Phil. So Phil, I'm going to unmute you. We are asking people to keep these questions quite brief. No, the hand has been lowered. Is there anybody else that has a question and they want to raise it? You can raise your hand.
I can see Jay Patel's.
Oh, I can see Sharon as well. Here you go. Unfortunately, I'm having some difficulty unmuting.
Hello?
Hello. There you go.
Okay, I think because I have to press a button once you unmute me. Thank you very much. I'm Sharon Tynan from AGK London. I'm really interested in hearing about what's going on here, because we are also running a campaign to encourage older adults and those with long-term health conditions, and we're working with NHS London and NHS Development and kind of supporting the messaging, not as well as just the flu. Also, we're doing one where we're saying now more than ever, get your free flu jab and protect yourself and those around you. My question is, though, as we're about to go into lockdown, I mean, we know London is on the naughty step completely for the take up of flu vaccines in those over 65. We do not reach the World Health Organization recommendation of 75%, but how are we going to reach those that, even though shielding has officially stopped, I know there are many older adults and housebound people that are afraid to go to the surgery, or will they be able to get a home visit, or will the district nurse be able to give them a free flu jab? Thank you.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you for your questions. And just coming back to your question about how do the housebound people would access the flu jabs? Every single GP surgery, we've got 52 practices in Croydon, and we've worked together to make sure, whether it's a PCN pharmacist or healthcare workers or the community nursing, the district nurses, they have lists of those housebounds and their carers who would get the flu jab in their own household. So yes, and everyone in the nursing homes, care homes, residential homes, it's a similar situation. So yes, that's the plan in place.
Excellent, thank you.
If I could ask you to mute yourself again once you've asked your question, and we've got some hands raised. So next I've got is Phil. So Phil, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, hi. I'm asthmatic, heavily asthmatic. I had my flu jab. I just want to know if it's advisable, if when it's available, if because I'm asthmatic, if I should have the COVID jab, because I've heard positive and also negative things about it. So I just wanted to know.
Would any of our panel like to answer that one?
Yeah, Rachel is saying yes.
Thank you. And thank you, Phil, and thank you for having your flu jab. And I think that Sharon's point is well made. Actually, it wasn't just London that was on the naughty step. The whole of this country was on the naughty step. We're not very good at taking up seasonal flu. I think that COVID this time has reminded people how you can protect yourself by from communicable disease by immunisation. And I think, Phil, we are still learning what this new vaccine around COVID is going to be. Is that actually there's lots of people working really, really hard. As soon as actually there is information around this, there will be communication to those people who are more vulnerable in relation to this, who will be encouraged to do this. So actually in relation to this is that I can't give kind of like the clinical pathway yet because we're still working on it. One of the things, I mean, I've said this in previous before, we did not know about this virus in the humankind before November last year. This is a novel virus. It is not flu. It is something that we have never seen within humankind at all. One of the reasons why there's quite a lot of we think it may be perhaps is because we are learning on a day-to-day basis. So actually in relation to this, it's the same as the vaccine as well. There are lots of people working very hard in terms of vaccination. What I will do is I'll make sure, working with my NHS colleagues, when we do that we communicate throughout the whole of Croydon to make sure that actually people who are eligible do this. I'm hoping that the vaccine will help, but let's not forget the hands, face, space.
Thank you, Rachel. We have Fahad next. So you're unmuted if you want to raise your question.
Hey, yeah, I just want to ask, is the flu vaccine grown in chicken eggs? And if so, how would that affect vegans or some Indian communities that don't have eggs? And another question, am I allowed to do that?
Yes.
I just want that, my son's school did vaccinations yesterday, and I'm a Muslim, and I rejected it. Nowhere in the letter did they say there were alternatives. So is it not possible for NHS to put that on the letterhead?
Does anyone in the panel like to answer that?
Yeah, I think Nenna says yes.
I've asked you to unmute. I think you need to accept
Thank you.
it.
That's all right. Thank you, Fahad. Thank you for the question. I suppose I have to start off by saying there are alternatives, both in terms of egg content and in terms of religious preferences. And you're absolutely right. These should be encouraged and discussed more proactively so that you can make an informed choice. I think that's a bigger conversation than just Croydon, but a conversation worth having. And there are different variants on vaccines that can be given for different reasons. So if you just speak to your healthcare professional, we'll be able to provide that for you.
Thank you. And Priscilla was next. So Priscilla, I'm going to unmute you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Yes, I just wanted to know, really, how will the COVID vaccine be administered? Is it a chip that some people are saying, or is it a regular vaccine? There are some people saying that it's just a way to control people, like a cashless society.
So can I answer just very quickly in terms of the last one? I wanted to just answer in terms of that. I can only apologise that you weren't given the alternative in schools. We have worked very, very closely with schools to make sure that actually for those people who do have faith-based reasons around porcine products, that they can have alternatives. So I'm very, very sorry. Drop me an email, rachel.flowers@croydon.gov.uk. And I'll have a word with our colleagues, because I thought we did that. So secondly, in terms of kind of like your Priscilla's question around this, we don't know how it will be kind of how the COVID vaccination will be administered beyond the standard one. One of the things I'm saying to everybody who asked me around this is that have a look in terms of the source of your information. Have a look in terms of who are the people saying these things around this. Is that a vaccine in relation to this as a public health director is not about controlling people, it's about saving people's lives. Kind of Now, I think the thing is in relation to the kind of messaging around, I've not heard about the chip or anything like that. And I think that I'm starting to hear a range of reasons why people think that they shouldn't be getting kind of like, vaccines. I heard this from measles, and we had an outbreak of measles within Croydon last year. Every year we lose 11,000 people a year in terms of flu. These are preventable communicable diseases. I think that the issue is that what it does, it introduces something into our body that allows us to actually fight against something that could kill us or kill our family around this. So I think in relation to the messaging that you're kind of reading around chips to control us, I would actually look at where that source is and why people are trying to stop you doing something that could protect you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we've got 2 more questions. So I'm going to ask you, I'm unmuting you, just.
Can we ask Suja next, please?
Yes, so I'm going to unmute now. Suja, if you'd like to ask your question. I think you need to accept me unmuting you.
Can I unmute myself?
There you
all
go.
right? Okay.
Yes.
I think very impressed by the by stressing the importance of life-saving, the importance of the vaccine, life-saving process. But why not make it accessible to all? Doesn't advising some people, some groups of people who are not eligible for free vaccine to say you can go and have it and pay for it, weaken the case for the influenza vaccine?
Rachel, I can see you've got your hand up. So
I have. Very, very good question. I'm a director of public health. My role is to reduce the inequalities within the community I serve, which of course is Croydon. I adore Croydon, and Croydon we do see significant numbers of inequalities. Is that over the period of time there have been a larger number of people eligible for the flu jab, but actually I'll be honest, kind of like as director of public health, I would like it accessible to everybody, kind of free of charge. That's what I'd like. However, in terms of the constraints around the money around that, there's lots of things I'd like. I'd like for everybody to be able to have affordable food every day, a hot meal a day, decent housing, kind of like a job, not linked around this. This things that we can control around this. This is why, in relation to those people who are the most clinically vulnerable, or super spread, is that actually the list that you have seen actually identifies those people who are the most vulnerable, the most likely to get health impact, or those people most likely to spread. So I absolutely agree. And in my perfect world, everybody would have flu, kind of like flu jabs and measles jab. And you know what? Everybody would be offered them. And you know what? Everybody who could take them would take them in my perfect world.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just think that Dr. Shetty just wants to add to that.
Suja, this is thank you for that question, and just adding to what Rachel has been saying. Now, yes, if life was brilliant and rosy, all of us would get a lot of free things, but life is not that, and this is the realities, and we have to accept that. But people who are at risk group and are at the vulnerable group. And yesterday I was at the clinical leadership group meeting where, we have GPs from all different practices in Croydon. And we are talking about health inequalities. We've been talking about it more in the last 6 months since the COVID time. Yes, there are inequalities, and yes, there needs to be a way. But this is something we can sort ourselves by taking certain decisions. Having a flu jab, helps yourselves, help your loved ones, reduces the inequalities. So I think that the question is, why not take it if we can sort the problem out? Because practices are struggling. They're contacting people, they're writing to them, they're texting them, but still the numbers, of the uptake are very, very low in the northern part of the borough.
Can I come back?
Thank you. We're going to have to keep it pretty brief, I think, because we're running a little bit behind. So if you can keep it brief, please feel free to do so.
I think access to it to the vaccine through pharmacists is much easier, and people actually are happy to go to the pharmacist. And I think it makes the messaging easier if it is done to everyone. But I rest my case there.
Thank you. And we've got Ripon, Ray next, and then we have Jay, and then I've had one question emailed in. So I think, and then we'll have to move away from the Q&A on here and we'll move to the chat Q&A.
Yeah, it's really can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a very simple questions really to all that to kind of decide where the investment needs to be in terms of dealing with the vulnerable, I suppose, service users, and how do you approach these service users, specifically knowing that a place like Croydon, where you do have a broad range of communities, and many of them, no doubt, are very hard to reach. So the question is, what sort of strategies do you actually use those who are literally too difficult to reach? Because, you know, in one way, local authorities and or I guess the NHS may have limitation to its resources as to how and on what capacity they reach the unreachable. So really, I'm trying to find out from, I suppose, from your professional expertise, what sort of steps do you take to reach those who are so difficult to unreach because of limitation of resource?
So I'll just unmute now.
So I'm very sure that Rachel will want to come in here, but I think that's such an important question, and it's a question I keep asking in many different groups at a Southwest London level and at a London level. First, I want to say that there's a real commitment and a real recognition that often the people who we most easily access are not necessarily the people with greatest need. And so events like today, I think, are really crucial in having that understanding that you can bring that I may not naturally have around who and how and where I can target better. So I would start with that. Secondly, to say that, again, there is a real commitment to this. So part of the work that's been done, both at Southwest London level and more importantly at Croydon level, is about understanding where we have gaps and understanding where we think we need to be targeted in our approach. So there's been a whole communication strategy that has been modified in such a way that we hope we'll be able to reach people who conventionally we have not reached before. Dr. Shetty has already spoken about the fact that we're going around both from a primary care perspective, but also from the community aspect of the hospital to domiciliary patients and people, so that we're reaching people who are less able to come to the trust. I think there's a lot more to be done, and I do think that these sorts of events and the ability of each of us as individuals to be ambassadors of the cause and to encourage our colleagues and our communities to come forward, this is actually going to be an important element of that strategy. I'm sure Rachel will want to say something additional.
Okay, thank you. So there aren't hard to reach groups. There are groups we haven't reached yet. What I didn't actually identify in my CV, I'll have to shorten that, was I spent 12 years as a community development worker working out within the communities. One of the things that we need to get better at, and I've been trying to do this within COVID, is about people within communities actually having the messaging so that actually they can consider accessing it. There are barriers, we know that, within the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. We know that there are significant barriers around that, even accessing certain parts of the health system. So we need to actually utilise, I mean, we've got a fantastic voluntary community sector around this, but actually at the moment we've got within Croydon, we do have some interesting and not true myths around this. I love Croydon, but boy, are we a place of linking anecdotes. You know, I know somebody who, I've got an auntie who did, oh, I've got an uncle who didn't. So what I'm trying to do around this, and this is why in terms of these kind of things, is actually giving you the information so that you can go into the communities that we can't reach and actually say, do you know what? That's rubbish. That's absolute rubbish. And they'll go, no, I heard it. Auntie told me. Oh, well, Auntie's wrong. Are you sure? Yeah, these are the conversations around this, because it's the empowerment around the communities and actually one of the things around the community resilience around this is about you as our community taking the power around this, around the control of your life, is that we can provide support around you. There's some wonderful, wonderful clinical inputs around this, but actually in relation to this, it's about you understanding what is being said to you and actually whether it's true and what you want to do with your community. And I'm a firm believer. It takes a long time, 2 years to get a relationship, 5 years trust. This is in relation to where we are within COVID. This is why I've been so visible around this. I want to be as truthful as I can to everybody within the community, so that actually you can say, well, I don't know what anybody else is saying outside Croydon, but within inside Croydon, my director of public health is saying this. And you know what? I kind of believe her.
Kat, could I just add something onto that? Because I think everything that's been said is absolutely right. But Nena touched upon a word, which is a horrible word, but it's an important word in this context: herd immunity. You can all contribute to protecting our most vulnerable communities, even where we're unable to reach them. If you take the vaccine, you're reducing the transmission in the community, and therefore you're reducing the risk to those most vulnerable. So just as we as professionals have a duty to reach out to those communities that we haven't yet reached, you can make your impact upon their health and well-being by taking the vaccine, which will reduce community transmission, which will reduce the risk to those individuals. I'm really looking forward to seeing whether or not the 25% of you at the start of this meeting who said you wouldn't take the vaccine have actually changed your mind. Do think about it in terms of your moral responsibility to the people that you live with in the community, as well as a means of protecting yourselves.
Brilliant, thank you. And we've got Jay Patel and then my email. So Jay, you're unmuted if you'd like to talk.
Thank you very much. I think this is a fitting time that I'm going to ask the question anyway, because I agree with the expert panel. Can everybody hear me? Okay. I wish this was carried out about 3 weeks ago, because that was the time when I was going through this question about should I have a flu jab or not, because up to now, though I'm over 70, I resisted it purely because I've never caught the flu ever in my life. But what was important this time around in turning my decision was I did some research, and I found that the symptoms with the flu were sometimes very similar or overlapped with the symptoms of coronavirus as well. So I voluntarily got tested with coronavirus, and I was tested negative, which was good news, thrilled about it. But then the question about the flu jab came along, and I thought the risk of those two things getting together is even more dangerous. And I made my decision to go and have that. And that decision was made purely in terms of understanding what the difference between the flu was and what the difference between the cold was, in terms of that colds are not necessarily related to the flu itself. Flu is more dangerous, and that convinced me. So what I would like to ask as a question is, I think we need to be a little bit more open from the medical world when people do question it, but we need to make them understand that some of the symptoms that are related to flu are why they're a little bit more dangerous than the cold. And if it combined with COVID, it can be even worse, because antibiotics are not going to work in certain situations. People have this myth as well that if you take an antibiotic with when you have a flu, it will get rid of it, but sometimes it doesn't. And your immune system is very important as well. So if medically you can identify the immune system within individuals that come forward to you guys, is it possible that you can advise them about the immunity in relation to their personal background, their personal illnesses they might be suffering? And those are the things that are very important, as I feel. I think that's the message we need to give the community as well.
Fantastic, thank you, Jay.
If I may come in, Jay. Sorry, firstly to say, I was shocked when you said you were over 70, so I do need to register that. Secondly, I think you're talking about messaging. I actually think I need you to be my poster boy, because you said that beautifully and authentically and relevantly, and everything you've said is so true. I am a medic at heart, but I don't think we have to medicalize everything we do, and very, very open to questions and challenges. And it's important that we are, because then we dispel a number of myths that may inadvertently prevent people from doing the right thing. So every single time I have a contact with a patient or a person, and similarly, I ask for all my staff, I know Vashali does the same, I know Rachel does the same, we have to use the opportunity to share something that may make a difference. That difference is not just about that individual, it's about the generations that they impact. And so there's a legacy opportunity for all of us. And I think that comes back to, we are all morally obligated as a community member to make a difference and to actually be an ambassador for change. You're absolutely right, but there's certain things we know generically, even without knowing an individual. So I know, despite your youth, that if your biology clock says 70, your immune system is going to be weak, and therefore I do need to protect you. I will have the conversation on an individual basis, but I think this is why some of the categories around vaccination are there. You also made a really important point around conflating symptoms. So the symptoms of the cold can be similar to the symptoms of flu, but it's a whole different magnitude, the intensity, the impact, the outcome. And similarly, there will be some overlap with symptoms of COVID. And so you're right, having the flu vaccine to make sure we can reduce that sort of cross differential in terms of diagnosis is important for that reason. Also, if you go back to what Rachel Flowers mentioned first up, if you have the flu and COVID, that impact on you as an individual is severe. And so having the flu vaccine to protect yourself in every single way is so important. And I am delighted to hear that you've done it. And I do need to come and make you my poster boy. Feels like a really trivial term, but something of that ilk. Thank you very much.
So if I can also say, so Jay, thank you for sharing your journey. And I think the thing is that for me, in terms of getting the community, there are different groups of people, from the people who immediately go to vaccines to people like yourself who aren't sure, who research. And I think that's really important, to people, and there may still be people on this call who is still not certain. And I think that this is kind of like the point around this. And this is part of the complication. Is I am not a medic, I'm a non-medical director of public health, but never in my career kind of have I actually seen the public so interested or engaged in their own health. Kind of like, is that actually in relation to this, these are the conversations that we've been having for a while. And I think that pandemic does focus people a little bit more around this. So this is an opportunity for us as a community to start thinking about what we can do to protect ourselves. Some people will wonder why I and not Mike didn't mention herd immunity. And the reason I'm not is because actually in terms of COVID, there was quite a lot of myths in terms of what's happening around herd immunity or immunity around this. But certainly in terms of some of the diseases that we know about, and seasonal flu we know about, we know it is hideous. We know that it kills people. We know that some of us are more vulnerable to getting the illness, and some of us are more vulnerable of dying. We know that a seasonal flu jab is significantly more likely to protect your life and mean that you won't get ill health. Is significantly more likely to protect the people that you love and the people that you can get and won't get flu as well. And I think the thing is that for me, it's great having people saying, yes, I get the flu jab. It took me kind of like I said, I nearly died twice with flu, and I'm young and I hadn't got underlying health conditions. Jay, brilliant story. Those of you who are just saying, no, I need to see for myself, I need to investigate. I get the feeling, Jay, that actually, even if Nena had told you, you'd have still done a bit of research anyway. I get the feeling. Just a thought. But actually, for those of you who are just thinking, I don't know, so there's a whole load of us who've been doing this for a long, long time. If you don't believe us, Jay was a cynic. He did the research and he got the jab. So why don't you get a jab? If Jay can do it, having read around this, even though he can, I think the rest of you can.
Thanks, Rachel. If Jay can, you can. That's the next motto for us. So I'm going to, just in terms of timing, I know you've been very generous with your time, panel, and I just want a few more minutes of your time, really, because I'm going to ask Kat to go through the email questions she's got, and then get Lizzie to come in and go through the chat for us so we can start wrapping up. And I will ask my colleagues to really shorten your bits to bullet points virtually so that we can still let people go, even if we're just 10 minutes late. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I received an email. So I'm involved in lots of community groups, particularly with parents. And one of the questions they asked was, with young people in the letter, it talks about a high number of side effects, and one of them being cold-like symptoms. And with the delays in getting COVID testings, they would have to take time off school. And that actually caused a lot of parents not to get it, because this time round, if they had that time off, they'd have to wait to be tested if they had cold symptoms. So what I want to do for the purpose of the minutes and back to the group that raised this question is just reiterate that there are no side effects in the young spray. And if there is there any differentiation between the COVID symptoms that would allow them still to go to school?
So what a cracking question. In the kind of, one of the things in terms of COVID that we're trying to do is trying to keep people in school as long as possible. But actually, it's about good infection control. If a child has actually got a streaming cold, why would you want them to go to school in the first place? That's how they got that. I mean, it's a communicable disease. And speaking as a mother of children, but also the daughter of a teacher who kind of basically, unless my head was falling off, would send me to school. Kind of like, and this is how communicable diseases spread. And it's interesting is that I hear it a lot where people say, oh God, my son's daughter's just had diarrhea thrown up and they won't let them back into the school for the next 48 hours. Well, no. And I think that this is in relation to this, the inconvenient truth about communicable disease is that actually to stop it, we actually need hands, face, space. So I know it's not necessarily what people want to hear, but actually in relation, I'll be honest, this is the bit where you'll start scratching your head. It's a bit like nits. It's kind of like, you know, if you send somebody kind of like your child into school with nits, you're all scratching your head now. It's that, you know, actually in relation to that, it's come kind of like a week or so, there'll be a head full of lice around the whole school and you'll be all looking around. And actually nits is the visible thing around what communicable disease does within school. And while I sympathise, and I'm you know, kind of like my children are grown up now, but I do recognise that it's really, really difficult. If your child has something which you think is communicable, don't send them to school.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And yeah, thanks, Rachel. And now, thank you very much, everyone, for asking your questions. And now we're going to move on to Lizzie with some of the comments and the questions coming from chat.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. The chat's been really good. I just wanted to relay one from Asma, who said that she was asking, how much is the flu jab if you can't get it for free?
So I think everyone's gone quiet thinking, I believe it's somewhere between 10 and 15 pounds, but I would need that confirmed. Rachel is nodding her head, yes.
Okay, good. That's brilliant. And then what's really great is that a lot of the questions have already been answered that were put up onto chat, but someone else has asked, what about eating a balanced diet or immune boosting foods? Does that actually help improve immunity?
So I've come in on that one as well, and really and truly, you should do everything you can to keep yourself well, and keeping yourself well. And this is not just about flu. It's not just about COVID. It's in general, and that includes staying well hydrated, eating a balanced diet, and making sure that you get enough rest and exercise. And this is about your physical health as well as your mental health. All of those things together. When we talk about health, it's a state of total physical and mental and emotional well-being. All of those things work together to optimize your environment and keep your immune system strong. So yes.
Brilliant. And I've literally just scrolled through the chat while you were talking, and brilliantly you all have actually answered all of the chats, sort of whether it was intentional or not, just from all the questions that were verbally asked. So that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I had loads of questions myself, but I reserve them for when we see each other at the board meetings, because I'm keen to move this along there. And I thank you so much. And I think certainly, I'll be very honest, I was a bit of a skeptic myself, and I'm slowly swaying towards getting it done. So well done, panel. Thank you very, very much indeed. And keep your questions coming into chat, because we will be saving those and trying to get answers from our panels later on so that we can email them out to you. And I promise we'll do more of these to make sure you've got access to you know, the most qualified and the most knowledgeable people in Croydon, so that you can really get it from the horse's mouth as such about whether these myths are just myths or if there's any factual reality to them. Now, one of the other things we want to really quickly cover and is ARCC's embarked on the Expert Patient Programme and Long-Term Conditions Programme, which is funded through the CCG. And I want to introduce my colleague Lizzie to talk a little bit more about that programme. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I will be super quick, guys, don't worry. So I just want to say at the very beginning that if you have any questions, because I will be extremely brief, please email me. I've put my email up on the chat, I think twice now. So if Mamoon, you could bring up the PowerPoint for me, that would be fantastic. So basically I've joined Asian Resource Centre to run both the Expert Patients Programme and the Long-Term Conditions Programme. And just starting with the Expert Patients Programme, or EPP, it's literally for anyone who lives with one or more long-term conditions. And that can be respiratory conditions, so things like COPD, diabetes, hypertension, things like that. So if you're living with that, or if you know someone who is, or you're living in a household with someone who suffers with any long-term condition, then this might be a really brilliant course for you, and it's 6 weeks. And there's all sorts of things we're going to learn on this Expert Patients Programme. So we'll be covering things like healthy eating, exercise, all of those sort of standard things that improve your health and help you cope, but we will very specifically target things that happen with long-term conditions, things like how do I deal with pain or tiredness? I think there's a lot of frustration that really comes from coping with a long-term illness because it's every single day. So we'll directly work with that, and we'll give you some fantastic coping strategies for things like depression, anxiety, and other feelings. And I think a really positive thing about the Expert Patients Programme is that we also support you to work out how to communicate with your health professionals really confidently, you know what sort of questions to ask, and just to feel really comfortable with them. And then we will do all sorts of relaxation techniques, and we will always keep it realistic as well, and set those realistic goals. So next slide, brilliant. So I am keeping it brief. So frequently asked questions. Do you need to pay? No, it is completely free. Do you need to be referred by your doctor? You can be, that's absolutely fine. You can be referred by health professionals as well, but it is also open to self-referral. So if you just think this course would be really helpful for you, I want to learn a little bit more, then absolutely self-refer. And it's structured for 2 hours every week for 6 weeks. Normally, it would be a face-to-face thing or a group thing, but obviously during COVID, fantastically, the whole thing can be converted online. So please join us. So the long-term conditions programme, the two feed into each other. So don't worry if in your brain the two blend together, they're both supporting long-term conditions. With the long-term conditions programme, we are doing a lot more on raising awareness as well. And that's because, as it's been mentioned before by our amazing health panel, prevention is better than cure. So we do really want to get in there early and help people recognise sort of the high risk factors for long-term conditions. So we're going to be doing that primarily virtually, as you can see on the screen, while COVID's happening, and in the places that you're still allowed to attend, so supermarkets and essential shops. But as hopefully, fingers crossed, things develop and things open up, we will move into community groups, faith groups as well in Croydon. So next slide for me, Mamin. Brilliant. So for this long-term condition programme, we are going to be doing at least 8 community events in Croydon and at least 6 online events. I've already started planning the online events, and I think we're going to have more than 6. So I think you're going to be really, really well catered for in Croydon for knowing how to deal with any sort of long-term condition. And we will also be offering one-to-one health checks. And that's things like our Know Your Risk tools. So basically we measure certain things about you so that you can see how high a risk you are of developing type 2 diabetes and things like this. So please, you know, keep an eye on everything from Asian Resource Centre, because all of these things are going to be such fantastic tools for you to utilise. I think I'm nearly there, so I'm going super quick. So the last thing is obviously to run both of these programs and to reach as huge amount of community as possible, especially hard to reach communities in Croydon, then I need to recruit some fantastic health champions. And I'm really looking for people who are already leaders in their community, so community or faith leaders. So people that, you know, you might be the sort of person that people might ask you questions for, or you might be the sort of person that leads groups. So if you are that person, please do contact me, and we will train you so that you feel confident in what we're asking you to do. And that will be things like collecting community conversations, and really importantly, signposting people who might have attended some of the long-term conditions health checks. And if they say, oh, actually, you know, my diabetes risk is quite high, what do I do now? Well, our community health champions, you would be the sort of people who would direct them to the right places, the right sources of information, to the right, you know, centres, health centres, GPs, etc. And we want you to be inspiring and supportive, basically to help our community and help the members who might be developing long-term conditions, or hopefully beforehand getting their health and well-being back on track. So please do contact me if you think you're one of those fabulous people. And you can see on the screen now that you can email me at this address, just my name, lizzie.hewitt@arcclimited.com. And you can also call the Asian Resource Centre number and they'll put you in touch with me. But just be aware, I only work on Monday, Tuesdays and Fridays. I work somewhere else on the other days. So hopefully, I know that was brief, but I hope you got some sort of idea.
Thank you, Lizzie. Thanks very much for that. And I know before people start dropping off, I'm really keen on doing the poll again. And we've actually got 2 polls for you to do this time. So let's try again, Mamoon, get the first one up.
Okay, so at the beginning of the session, we asked the same question, which was, I've got the wrong one up, 1 second. About the flu vaccination. Will you be taking the flu vaccination? So we had 75% of you said yes, 25% said no. So the same question is being asked again. So let's see how well our expert panel have done. Okay, I'm launching the poll for you. Okay, yes, no, or not sure. Those are the 3 options. So 45% of the people have voted so far. Okay, we're at 65%. Just give it another 30 seconds. The room's gone very quiet now. Everyone's in suspense. Right?
Yeah, waiting for this.
I'm excited to see if it's changed.
No pressure.
We're at 71%. I'll just give it a few more moments and let's see. Okay, I'm going to end it in 10 seconds. Last chance. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the results will appear on your screen.
Well done. I think that was more suspenseful than the US elections. Brilliant. So our panel have done really well. You've managed to swing 12% people into not.
Oh my Lord.
And then you've got 1% of people, and had I been able to vote, I would have voted no earlier and yes now. So just to put on the record, you've certainly shifted my thinking, and I thought that was just brilliant coverage of all the myths that we've been able to come up with, and I'm sure there's some more that we will bust in the future. But well done, panel, really good, and I'm glad we've been able to convince a few more people now to consider taking the flu vaccine. We've got another poll to do. This one, I'm surprised we've managed to go so far without talking too much about COVID. And I know there was a little concern earlier, Naina, before we had this session, that it might become very COVID related, and it hasn't. We've stuck to flu as much as possible. Let's try and do our next poll just for collecting information.
Yes, so the final poll is COVID vaccination poll. Will you be comfortable to take the COVID-19 vaccination? The options are yes, no, not sure. So I will launch the poll again. Okay, you can start voting now. Okay, we're halfway there, 50% almost voted. Okay, we're at 85%. I think we're more or less there. I'll give it a few more seconds. This one is looking very different. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now and share the results with you.
Oh, it's very different.
There we go. 53% are saying yes, 33 no, and 13% not sure.
Yeah, that is more similar to the poll we took before, and that was a COVID poll as well, which has stayed similar. So panel, I think this is food for thought for us going in the future, and when the vaccine does come up, some of the things to consider as to where people are in terms of their thinking around whether they would take it or not. Certainly we will be doing more investigation on the ground, more consultation as we understand more about the vaccine. And I'm sure Rachel wants to say something, and I knew you'd come in there, and please do, Rachel.
Okay. That's not unsimilar to surveys I've seen across the country. I don't think that this group is very different to other surveys I've seen. So I think the thing is, in relation to this, is that I just wanted to kind of factor in the uncertain factor that people are within COVID as well. So I think that recognizing, of course, in terms of we're talking particularly around this group of community, but there is a lot of uncertainty across a lot of places too. So I think that actually the narrative needs to develop further as well. And I just wanted to say that because it's always nice to try and benchmark yourself where you are compared to the community or rest of the country feel. And I'm hearing surveys like this at the moment. So I've fed this back to the people who are doing the work in terms of the immunisation, the stuff that's happening around London too, about how we work with the communities, how we work with frontline staff as well. But I always said I was going to be transparent with you as the community I represent. So I didn't want you to think that this was not you were outlier. I think this is fairly typical at the moment. I think it's because we're all a little anxious about what's happening at the moment.
Thank you, Rachel, and I can second that. Every time I've heard Rachel speaking, she's been very frank and honest about the challenges, about the feelings of the community, and certainly I've as somebody who represents the community, I have no doubt that what Rachel tells us is really well informed. Thanks for that, Rachel. Now, we promised that we would do pick out three names and give you some mini hampers. So I'm going to let Kat facilitate this bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Very old school style. As you've all been joining the call, I've been writing your names down. So what I haven't been able to do is if anyone's left. So if anyone's left, I'll call out another name, but I'll take out the first one, close my eyes, and show it to the screen. Can you all see? Santosh. So Santosh, are you here?
Yeah, where is that?
Well done, Santosh. You'll get your mini hamper.
Right, closing my eyes. Next one. Oh,
Dr. Nina, well done. Excellent.
That's good.
That wasn't planned.
No, last but not least, I have no idea. And unfortunately, I could only write some people's first name because it happened so quick. So this is the last one, which is Elsie.
Yay. Hey, well done, Elsie. So you three will receive your hampers. I'm not sure how we're going to coordinate to make sure we get addresses and stuff because they will be posted or delivered to you. And maybe we need to find a way of connecting. We know all of you, and so we'll get in touch about how to get your mini hampers to you. I just also want to acknowledge that we've got Jay Patel in the room, who's our newly appointed chair, and you've already heard from Jay and his experiences, so thank you for sharing those with us. Jay, we are so nearly to the end, and I apologize we've gone over, but I knew it was so important for you guys to get your questions in, and we wouldn't have done such an important panel any justice if we try to shorten things anymore. So I'm just, the very last part of our thing will be just telling you what's happening at ARCC, as in, Mamoon, if you can just take us through some bullet points of the things that people can look forward to and join in, especially around health, and then we'll close the session. Thank you very much.
Yes, certainly. So first thing to note is the next virtual coffee morning date is Wednesday, the 9th of December, same time, 11 to 12:30. We'll send out further information in terms of the marketing closer to the time. The theme for that one will be the effects of lockdown and COVID-19 update. Just very briefly, some of the current ASCC activities. So ASCC and BLBG are still continuing our weekly food bank from the Hub Broad Green, which we started at the beginning of lockdown. We are still supporting our members with remote befriending calls in different languages. We are still helping our member organizations with project-related support, carrying out COVID risk assessments. And we will be starting our weekly online community chats from Monday, the 16th of November. This will be an informal weekly gathering where we will also do fun activities like exercise, meditation, arts and crafts, food carving, as well as other activities. This will be limited to a maximum of 20 people per session. We will publish more information next week in regards to that, so keep an eye on your email. Virtual coffee morning, yes, so I've already mentioned that. In terms of health communication messages, so we are working closely with Croydon Council, Public Health and the NHS to send out culturally appropriate messages and communications to the community. Liz has already covered the EPP and the LTC program. We are working in partnership with 10 grassroots organizations to deliver a project over 3 years covering health and well-being, DASV, education support, working with refugees and facilitating social gathering. Our Happy Healthy Communities project, again, is working with 4 different organizations to deliver gardening projects, weekly luncheon clubs and women's gathering. We are still continuing to support the Asian VCS with capacity building support and representation at strategic boards as part of our infrastructure role. That's it really. And finally, if you are not subscribed to our database, please do go to our website and click on the subscribe button to join our mailing list, or alternatively, you can email info@arccltd.com or give us a call on 0208 684 3784. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Maroon, and thank you all the staff who've powered this session and put lots of work inside it. Thank you to my expert panel. Appreciate your input. Thank you to everyone who asked a question and joined us today. The next coffee morning, as Maroon said, is the 9th of December. All that remains for me to say is have a great rest of the day. Go get your flu vaccine done, and we'll see you next time.